Okay, everyone, well, thanks a lot. I think people are still trickling in, but since we've got a pretty big audience and some, really gracious candidates who dedicated their time, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Hi, everyone. My name is Ray. I'm the head of marketing at FreshPaint. First, I just wanted to give a really big thanks to Molly and Brendan and Nimish and Alex and Harry. You've all played a big part in pulling this together, and you have a lot of things going on besides this panel. So thanks a lot for your generosity. I also wanted to thank the more than 550 people who registered for this. I think that kind of registration indicates that this is a discussion that we need to have. And before I hand it over, you guys are here for the panel. So before I hand it over to the panel, I just have a few housekeeping items that I wanted to touch on. So first, we've carved out about 20 minutes at the end of this panel for questions. There's an open Q&A at the bottom here in Zoom for you to submit them. And I encourage you to use the upvote feature because we probably won't have time to answer all of them. So let's make a couple really popular so we can get those out of the way. One question that I know you're thinking about, and I'm going to answer it for you right now. Yep, it's 2022. So this webinar is being recorded and you'll get a copy of it after the event. Another question that we're not really going to get a chance to cover today is literally what's in your tech stack. I think it's beyond the scope of this discussion. But the cool part is that Viet, who's a product manager over at 30 Madison, he created this awesome searchable directory of vendors and healthcare companies. And the best part about it is he built in the ability to give reviews and ratings and comments. So I'm going to drop that into the chat here in Zoom. And I think it could be a great way for everyone to continue this conversation and share some knowledge. And for anybody who's played a marketing role, you're going to get a kick out of this one. I'm not the head of marketing tomorrow if I don't tell you about FreshPaint. So digital health startups know that customer behavioral data is critical to growth, but getting it and staying HIPAA compliant can be really hard. So FreshPaint helps automatically capture that customer behavioral data, like who's doing what in your product. And we feed it to tools you use to analyze and gauge customers. So think software like Mixpanel for product analytics and Customer.io for messaging. And we do all of that in a HIPAA compliant way. So towards the end of this panel, I'm going to launch a poll to give you an opportunity to learn more about that. So that's it from me on housekeeping. I'm going to hand it over to Harry and the panel and let you take it from here.
Cool. Thanks, Ray. So we're here today because the digital health sector has really exploded in both kind of size, total addressable market, and maturity. I'm kind of visualizing this as two waves crashing into the eager VCs, founders, operators like yourselves, and even Twitter shitposters. So this first wave, I see has been a long time coming. It's being served by these care delivery and care administration startups. They're either B2C or B2B2C. But the second wave is being served by these infrastructure companies that power these really cool folks on the first wave. This kind of weird analogy kind of stuck with me while I was hanging out on Memorial Day weekend on a river. So, but maybe there's a different analogy. See, as a PM at Komodo Health, I prefer to buy/license rather than build whenever possible, and let other people do the deep thinking on how to build microservices better than I can. Yet it's always a tricky undertaking. So that's why Ray here from FreshPaint gathered myself and these four awesome panelists to wear black t-shirts, as well as speak about their experiences. I imagine this will be somewhat of a group therapy session for everyone here, speaking and listening. So I gotta say, let's get started. How about each of you all on the panel start by sharing your name, your role, your current company, and given the recent holiday, what is your favorite topping on a burger, whether it's a meat or meatless burger? Let's go alphabetically and have Alex start, then Brendan, Molly, and finally Nimish.
Cool. Well, thank you for having me. This is the first virtual webinar I've done in like 2 years. So anyway, I'm our director of product at Carbon Health, running our consumer team. I've been with the company now for about a year and a half, have held a bunch of different roles throughout the last year and a half, everything from building vaccine tooling to internal tools, and now most recently the consumer app, based in Austin, Texas. And my favorite burger topping is probably bacon.
A great one. Brendan.
Hey everyone, Brendan Keeler, Senior Product Manager at Zeus Health, based out of Portland, Oregon. For this Memorial Day, I was in Frankfurt or near Frankfurt, Germany. So I guess like a sausage on top of my burger or just a sausage. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Brendan. Molly.
Hi, I'm Molly. I am head of product at Allara. We're an early stage startup that provides virtual specialty care for women's chronic conditions. We're based in New York. I'm also based in New York, and favorite topping on a burger or anything is pickles.
It's like the one food in the world I dislike. Sorry. Sorry.
Hi.
It's my turn. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Nimish Parikh. I'm with Redesign Health. Redesign Health is a company creation platform. We've got over, I think, 300 million in assets under management, and we fund ideas, promising ideas in digital health. We spin out a lot of great companies like Calibrate, MedArrive, and Uplift. I'm part of the product team there, which is super fun because I get to bounce around a bunch of different digital startups that we funded across B2C, B2B. And in terms of hamburgers, love a good beef hamburger. I like blue cheese on my hamburger. I have attempted to cook the blue cheese inside the hamburger meat itself, which if I can pull it off is really fantastic, but usually epic fail. So that's me.
I don't mean to troll y'all, but that's also like the second food I dislike. Let's get beyond burgers. And so just to warm us up here, asking everyone in the group, and we can go backwards order. What do you most regret building / developing rather than, I'll use the word like buying or licensing? What capability, feature, service, product do you most regret having ever built in your career? Nimish.
Oh, you went with me first, Harry? So yeah,
No.
in terms of, and so my personal career, it's actually an example in diagnostic imaging, which is really niche. I was at a company previously that bought a really old school on-prem diagnostic imaging platform. Hopefully not many of the other folks here in that example, because the on-prem world went to the cloud shortly after and our whole tech stack was outdated. But the one thing I hear at Redesign from other founders that we bring in is actually the number of founders that have built their own EMR systems and just the pain and anguish they went through building their own EMR platforms. So it's sort of what I call the digital health paradox, where you have so many companies that have products you could license, including EMRs, yet some of the most successful companies in our space like Oak Street, CityBlock, even One Medical have built a lot of their own product stacks and components. So interesting to see that paradox. But people that have gone through the work of building an EMR, I think it's a really tough road to go.
We have. So we're right in that boat of having built our own EHR from scratch.
Bold move. Okay.
And do you regret it, Alex, or?
I don't think we regret it. I think it's you just don't realize that it's an entire company in and of itself until you're really in the weeds of building it. And so there's a lot more that we can do now that I think we wouldn't be able to do had we had just licensed Athena or Epic or something. But it's been 5 years, so like it takes a long time to build a really good EHR.
And there's so much Epic functionality to catch up with, right? I mean, it's hard to get to that point. So
yeah. I mean, and we're full stack, right? So we have our own clinicians on staff and providers, and they're always asking like, why don't you have dot phrases? And how come I can't do this? And so that they're used to that old paradigm, and we've got our own way of doing things, for better or worse.
Yeah. Okay. Molly, what has been the worst thing you've ever built? Besides the build. It's all probably great.
I would say, okay, so I think like overall, any company I've been at, a CMS, don't do it unless you are a content company. There's like, everybody thinks they have like a reason that's like special, like you don't do it. That's probably the one that I regret building twice. And then I think a scheduling system, if you can avoid it, I would recommend not building it. I've done it once and then we had to rebuild it. So like we weren't going to swap something in, and I think we could have done that. So I think scheduling, anything where like we were building the V2 and we were like, let's just keep going with what we have. Like that usually was the wrong decision. So
yeah.
but those are my main two.
I get it. Perfect. And that's a good segue to Brendan, because I know you're deep in the scheduling world in your recent collab post. Anything else that scheduling or otherwise that you wish you didn't build?
Oh, but analytics and like data stack stuff, like as soon as you start being like extracting in bulk or like like importing in bulk, there's tools for that. And yeah, there's like 100 ways to solve it, but almost everything is like, let's use something off the shelf. Let's use a Fivetran. Well, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself into analytics and such, but like moving data within your enterprise can be done more effectively than having your engineers just code bulk stuff.
Yeah, I feel that. So Alex, you're definitely not going to say any HR. So what do you regret most in your career building?
So I haven't worked on it directly at Carbon just yet, but I would say don't try to reinvent the billing wheel. And I think there's definitely the startup mentality of, oh, we could do collections better, we can get billing right if we just do it ourselves. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that we probably should not have brought in-house out of everything. I think EHR, yes, but billing's one of those things where there's a lot of companies that just focus on that, recommend going down that path. And then I would agree with Brendan on analytics. Like we did a lot of stuff in-house early on in terms of analytics and customer data. It's a lot easier when you could just plug and play with an amplitude or a heap and go that way versus trying to save the 3K a month or whatever it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, perfect. With that little background, I'm curious how some of y'all think about like frameworks for making this build versus buy decision. Or now that you've gone through this a couple of times, if you were to make this kind of analysis again, what would be the different things you would consider build versus buy? And I do want to maybe focus on Nimish and Molly on this one, maybe starting with Nimish, where at Redesign, you kind of do this with companies, my guess is,
Oh yeah, it comes up a lot. It is one of the, and let's start with a little bit of empathy for your startup head of product. It is one of the toughest challenges they're going to face because they're going to make build versus buy decisions, and all of their choices are extremely visible to the entire team and the user base as a startup head of product. And indeed, the success of your venture can turn on how that impacts customer acquisition. The other friction point is your clinical team. Your clinical team can get very frustrated with the choices you made as head of product because they may not understand an MVP mindset. But overall, I'd say if you're going through this process, the first question to ask yourself is, what is my venture's core competency? What's our core competency? Because if you are a B2C venture, you are trying to build a compelling consumer user experience. And that is something you may want to build, to just master that yourself, and then basically buy all the professional facing components. So number one is ask yourself, what's our core competency? The second is, where are we in the product market fit continuum and journey? If you haven't achieved product market fit yet, then as a head of product, your seat is on fire. You are in the spotlight. You have got to achieve product market fit. And that means it's all hands on deck for whatever component of your stack addresses product market fit. Everything else can be bought. Companies that are later in that journey where they've achieved product market fit and they're already scaling, you see a lot of those ventures begin to actually bring some things that they bought, they actually start to build retroactively and retrofit, either for margin components or just because they want to build out their user experience. And the last one I would say is ask yourself, where do I have an information advantage? And by that, I mean, where do you have a use case where you actually end up knowing a lot more than the rest of the market? If you are a mental health startup and you do group therapy, you may have an information advantage in building a group therapy EMR. You will know that better than maybe even Epic or Athena or anyone, because it's a unique use case. You can build it. But for that same startup, a mental health provider, you may think you know video conferencing software, but you probably don't. You're never going to know it as well as Twilio. So you're just never going to have an information advantage over somebody with the scale of Twilio. So those are the kind of questions. That's the framework, the way I think about it.
Awesome. Molly, anything to add from your perspective at Allara?
Yeah. So very triggering to hear all of that because it's so true. Like when I joined Allara kind of in the back of my mind thinking like, we're going to hire a head of engineering and the build versus buy is going to be like we're going to do it together. And we still don't have one. We like deprioritized it. And I it was like, immediate, like making decisions like that. And they're these huge, they feel like earth shattering. So I feel like the first thing is to make sure you think about like, how easy would this be to undo? Sometimes it's not easy at all. And sometimes it can be super easy, but like knowing that is important. And then I think the first thing, like it's definitely an art and a science to think through, like if you should build or buy. I think the first thing to find out, especially if you're like 0 to 1 build at a company and you're running product, is like understand if you're a tech company or not. I think that's something that people skip a lot, and they're like, we have to build everything. We need all this IP. And I think like there's no shame in that. I'm at a service-based company. Like the technology enables this service. We are not building software as like our core thing. We're delivering care as our really core thing. So we can do that with like, we did that with no code to start. We bought everything. We got people through the process and seeing providers and gave them care and could kind of work on our product market fit without building anything. And then I would just kind of stress that differentiator piece, making sure it's really, really core to what you need to get product market fit. If it's not, don't try to build it. And maybe one other thing I would say is like, I would recommend writing out, not just like, we need an EMR, we need analytics, we need this, like writing out specifically every single feature you need in there so that you can kind of, one, it helps you eliminate bias. Similar to like when you're hiring someone, you would want to write their qualifications before you just like start meeting people. And it also helps gauge like the size of the build. If you were to build, as you start writing those features, you'll realize how complicated things are, and it might kind of help you make a decision there. Those are like some of the things I consider. And I think you can do that as like an activity to make it feel more frameworky, or you can just like do it in your own mind. Whatever like the organization kind of wants you to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Brendan, it seemed like you had something to add.
Yeah, just to jump in real quick on that and to add on is what we see at Zeus as we talk to specifically virtual first care subset of digital health is a spectrum of build by decision making. On the one end, you have Alex and and Carbon and Row, and they're just building everything. They need little bespoke things to plug out into the outside world, but they are a tech company, and that's fine. At the other end of the spectrum, you have unique care models, and you have unique go to markets of like, we're going to go in network, and we're going to go in network in this geography, and that's our whole differentiator of against other startups in this space. And they may use like an EHR plugged into a Salesforce Health Cloud and just be like, that's it with my 6 engineers. So I think the build by there's no right answer because it varies so dramatically depending on how you see yourself as a company. For virtual first care, for business associates, it's another another beast.
I imagine there's also something to your point of like what kind of company you are, but also where you are in the stage. And so I guess, Alex, for you, as you think, you've been at Carbon for a while, it is a more mature company than some of the other folks on this panel. As you're able to like retrospect, are there certain parts of the stack, again, of a digital health, care delivery, care management company that you think, more often than not needs to be built in-house rather than can be bought?
Yeah. So I would say there's a couple of dimensions that we look at that I don't think have been mentioned here just yet. I would say even through the last 18 months as I've been at Carbon and we've grown significantly, the number one most important thing is, are we actually providing the care that we say we're going to patients? And everything else can be broken besides that. And if that's working, then we can sort of fix the duct tape afterwards. As we look at building versus buying, I think that there's an element to, are we actually building this thing custom made from the ground up, or are we just using APIs to build a better experience? So I think about like, we recently, back in August of last year, went through a really big project to rip out our entire customer support platform across all of our clinics, all of our call centers, all of our care pods, all of our remote workers, and who are doing customer support. And we looked at building a custom experience on top of a Twilio or Amazon Connect. And we ended up going with TalkDesk after all was said and done, because they just offered everything out of the box in like it was mentioned earlier, but like, it's not our core competency. Like we're not a call center company, we're a healthcare company. And so that was but there was one of our differentiators is providing really good customer support and like having a customer experience where you're not, where someone's actually picking up the phone and you're not sitting on hold for hours and hours. But we figured that we could do that with someone who had built everything out of the box versus us trying to reinvent the wheel, even though like infrastructure was there. Like, and to give you another example, like today we use Zoom for our telehealth visits. We could use the Twilio API, or that there's a bunch of other APIs for building video chat experiences, but it's just not going to move the needle on the business right now. I think there's a lot more to do than just build a really nice web experience that you can chat with your provider. Like we're on Zoom right now, like it gets the job done. And so I think there's always that dimension. And then when you hit our scale, which is several thousand employees, we've got 120 plus locations, then we start to look at margin expansion, and that really becomes the core driver of, one, do we need to like fix something that's broken? And then two, how do we do it? Do we build it or do we buy it? I would say in most cases, even these days, we still buy stuff. We just probably build a wrapper around those experiences. It leads to more dependencies, but again, it's like tasking inside of our EHR, messaging inside of our EHR. Those are built from scratch, but then things like customer support and, like immunization reporting, we can use APIs for doing those things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, as we think about, frameworks here, I also want to focus on some questions that we got from folks signing up in advance. And in many ways, I think about the different capabilities of one of these digital health companies. The first one key capability is, the analytics stack. A second one is the EHR, which we'll touch on, and then lastly, scheduling. So focusing first on the analytics stack, I feel like, Brendan, you set us up for this one also. So I'll start with you. What does a good analytics stack look like at a virtual first care company? I understand you built it from scratch. I'm assuming that was when you were at Redox, and so that's a little different. But as you think about the virtual care first companies now, what do you think is critical for them? Maybe not when they're going from 0 to 1, but when they're like at 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think user tracking and CDP is typically like what people think of first, and like that's why you come and look at FreshPaint, or you get your CDP up, your customer data platform, you pipe that over to a Mixpanel, Amplitude, Pendo, whatever, and then after that you can start to be like, all right, let me use like an ELT, like Fivetran, get more data over to a data warehouse, and start to really build things up there. There's an interesting trend now with some like reverse ETL stuff, so out of your warehouse back into applications, but I think that's of a like very high maturity level in your overall analytics stack, like just getting to the point where you have those initial pieces of the CDP, your user analytics, and then warehouse plus operational data via like a Fivetran is you can do a lot of fun stuff with that.
Yeah. Could you explain a little bit more? This is something, you and I have messaged about, the difference between, gathering some of these aggregated, insights or customer data, but then also like session tracking with like a tool like a Full Story. Can you talk about, as a product manager, when you're using both and what actions are you taking on those?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just piping over all the events allows you to see a lot of insights into just being like, okay, everyone's clicking on this button and they're dropping off here. And that's huge, right? You can know that there's something wrong, but the why, the exact why, is when you might use like a Full Story to see, okay, let me watch exactly where they're hovering or exactly what they're doing. So you can say, oh, it's because it doesn't really show up, or, diving into that exact person's head isn't possible with like a Mixpanel or something. You have to go to that next level. And not everyone has that. Not everyone needs a Full Story, but like if you're really cack-attuned and you're like, where am I losing customers? Then that's where you might plug that in.
And Nimish, I know you are working on advising and setting this up with a bunch of your portfolio companies. What are you advising them on? What are the key components for them?
Yeah, and I would say so. just to throw out a plug for analytics as a category, I think anyone that's building out a digital health experience, especially on the B2C front, you do not be shocked by the amount of drop off in the apps that we build. It is really difficult to get consumers to stick with these apps. So it's a huge argument for having an analytics step so you can continue to iterate and just build out your platform. So 4 components I see a lot in a good analytics stack, at least across our company's redesign. The first is a CDP. That's the foundation. It's the invisible glue. A lot of people don't know why they would use a CDP per se, but it is the invisible glue for your entire stack. It's the options now are better than Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics for that matter on the analytics side. It's worth it. And then on top of that, you're going to add in the second component, which is your aggregate marketing analytics platform. So an aggregate, use Mixpanel that's going to show you broad data, and it's going to give you those compelling flows to understand where your drop off is. So Mixpanel or Amplitude or what have you, everyone's got their preference, but you're going to have an aggregate marketing platform that I think Brendan and Harry just mentioned. Full story. So that's a third piece, is kind of individual marketing analytics platforms that look at a session level, and they have really cool techniques, understanding that N of 1, as Brandon said, the why of why people are doing it. And the fourth piece that I'm seeing more, it's really intriguing to me, is A/B feature deployment. So feature flagging technology deployed through a company called like Split.io and some of the others. And I think feature flagging is controversial in the developer community. Not everybody loves it. But if you like it, it's really cool to deploy features selectively on an A/B basis and actually test out some of your feature functionality to see what works.
Yeah, and these are all things that I'm thinking about on a weekly basis as well. It's kind of exciting. Moving on from analytics, I'd like to hear a little bit about the EHR. Again, I think a key part of all these companies is some type of system of record or tool to gather clinical related information, which I think will kind of is a lot, but not only what an EHR would do. So I'd like to hear first from Molly. You seem to be have some interesting background on what your company needs from an EHR. And are there any situations when you might not need one of those full featured certified ones? I should know what the name is, but there's like the meaningful use certified Cert 2 EHRs, and like there's 220 people about to blow me up on Twitter. So positive, but yeah.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of situations where I feel like you don't actually need an EHR. And again, like I go to like, what are the things you need to be able to do? Is it like, I need all my patients, or like charting, or ordering labs, or ordering prescriptions? Like individually, what are all those things that you're going to need? Are you going to take insurance? Like possibly in the next 5 years, I would even say, like maybe have that in the back of your mind. And then I feel like if you're never planning to take insurance, you could start already thinking like maybe on an EHR. Then if you're not like doing, like I talked to somebody recently, they were like, no insurance, no labs, no prescriptions. And I was like, okay, don't buy an EHR. That's like the whole thing. Yeah. If you're just like the charting or whatever, like there's really creative ways to get around that. And there's also really, really cool tools like I've used in the like 5 years ago or 3 years ago, I used Welkin for something that like worked really well for a behavioral health startup. And I think there's a lot of options out there that are like more close to the use case you want if you're not going to need the EHR features. Cause like you don't really want to have to use one. There's not like a super, I know we're all talking about this all the time, especially this group, but like there's not like an amazing headless EHR that everyone's using and it's like perfect for digital health. That doesn't exist yet to my knowledge. And so unless you're going to kind of like go back to the early aughts as soon as you open that EHR, and you don't want to do that unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Alex, as someone who's building an EHR homegrown, are there certain types of I would say product requirements that you're able to build kind of very quickly that you're noticing that some of our product manager colleagues can't get done with the EHRs that exist today? Like what, maybe said differently, like what are cool things your EHR can do because you've developed it that others can't?
Yeah. So I don't have a good frame of reference for this because I've never used another EHR. This is my first stint in healthcare. And so the only experience I really have, besides like peeking over my doctor's shoulder when I'm at the doctor and looking at their EHR, I don't have a ton of experience with others. But like, for example, we recently, we're in the process of switching to a regionalization model for customer support and some other like supportive tangential teams. We've got a lot of work that has to go into the EHR to support that. Like tasking now has to go to groups and messaging now has to go to groups. And so, but the nice thing is we can add custom filters and we can add custom workflows and all these things in a matter of weeks instead of like, I guess, submitting a support or feature request to Epic or someone and saying, hey, can you please add this thing? We need it for our workflow. It's things like that inside of our, what we call the provider app that we've added that I think make it a bit more delightful. Like every provider has their own. I don't know if other EHRs have this, but like we have this feature called macros. And it literally, if you have someone coming in for a chief complaint and you need to do everything from the notes all the way to the prescriptions being filled, labs, follow-ups, you just press one of your preset entire care plans and it just does the entire thing for you. And so every provider can have their own. We have company ones that we've created that providers can use. And so there's just a lot of, I'm sure there's a lot of nuanced things that we've built just for our own personal workflows that make things a bit more efficient. I'd have to go look. I think we've compared after hours charting time between us and other EHRs, and we're significantly less after hours charting time. And it's one of the metrics that we track with the success of the provider app is just how often are providers having to use it when they're done seeing a patient or when they're done with their shift and they're catching up on notes. And I'll give you another example. So like we recently piloted a vending machine prescription vending machine inside one of our clinics in Berkeley, where you can literally get your prescription, walk up to the vending machine, type in your name and your, I don't know, 2 pieces of information. It spits out the prescription for you. That was like a half-day integration with our EHR to do that instead of having, I don't know what that process would have been with someone else, but we didn't have to, I guess we don't ever have to think, can we do it? It's just how long is it going to take?
Yeah, I can walk to that Carbon Health clinic. But maybe just like a quick follow-up for you, Alex. What is it? Ryan from the crowd asked, does Carbon Health run into any note cloning issues if providers are using macros? My guess is what he's referring to is just copy paste and not looking at the details. And therefore like the quality of the clinical note is not as good.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't automatically publish. I mean, it's in practice, it should be a way of just pre-filling in like 80% of what you need, and then you only have to finish the remaining 20%. I'm sure that there are a ton of cases where providers are just hitting publish and it's, they're not reviewing. It's not great. I think it's no different though if someone were to just type a note and not really, I guess, give it too much thought and just hit send. And I don't think our providers are trained to do that. Like it's not the sort of magic silver bullet solution. It really is just like an efficiency speed mechanism for providers charting. But I'm sure we've run into cases where, the data could be out of date. Maybe they made a note a year ago, they haven't updated it. So there are things that we could build around it product-wise for guardrails, but I think our providers are trained to not do that.
Awesome. Okay, cool. I would love to talk more about EHRs, and actually, Brendan, I feel like has written a post about all of our topics coincidentally. So let me just, if you want to learn more about that, I'll post his one of his Substacks about this. But to get us to allow to move forward, I want to talk about scheduling now. And again, Brendan, I need to find your, while you talk, I'll post that scheduling one too. But can you talk about, maybe Brendan, have you talked about your different teams approaching, scheduling, or was your analysis more of an outside in?
Yeah, I mean, we see a broad cross-section of virtual first care providers, and even though we're not currently pursuing scheduling at Zeus, it's a big, thick, thorny problem that, I wrote this article about recently with Jan Felix Schneider. Because you have things with virtual care that break the assumptions of the built-in scheduling of a lot of legacy EHRs. You have, multiple time zones. You have group scheduling. You have weird billing considerations. Provider patient matching. all that, plus even just in the world before virtual first care, scheduling was kind of hard. You know, my friend who worked on Cadence at Epic, he had probably the shit module of Epic because it's just painful. And every hospital thinks they're a special, unique, case of visit types and scheduling rules because Dr. Smith has to golf on the third Tuesday of every month or whatever, or when the moon is waxing, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to encode that, and a lot of it lives as tribal knowledge within the schedulers' heads.
Yeah, it's tricky, and there are companies that I think from a B2C side that do it closer to like an open table thing, but still it's adoption's not that high. I don't know. Molly, do you have to deal with scheduling at your company? Do you have it out of the box, or how does it, as you think about your virtual first company, do you kind of align the supply of patients with the capacity of clinical providers?
Yeah, it's definitely challenging, especially when you're like first starting out and then all of a sudden you start scaling faster than your scheduling is scaling. Now it becomes like, I think that's been probably the most painful like scale issue is balancing scheduling. But we're still using what we used as our like first no code, like it was in this stack and it's still there. And we connect that through our system to our EHR. So there's like a record of that appointment in the EHR, and that's like been working pretty well. I try to keep an eye on stuff like scheduling is a big one where I'm like, in 3 months, this is going to break and we need a plan for like when it breaks, what are we doing? So we're moving it to another platform that we use for like provider management tools. We use Source Health. We love them, and they have just built scheduling, and we're thrilled to be able to move over to that. But yeah, that's one downside I think of like EHR scheduling is always terrible, like not even usable. And so off the shelf EHR scheduling was never like an option, which required like a second system, and then you have to connect them. So there's like certain things like that. Scheduling is probably the worst in terms of like having to connect it back.
Yeah.
I can talk a bit about what we do, because that's another thing that we've built end to end. So scheduling is really, really hard. I think we're on our second iteration. Like we literally call it scheduling 2.0. It's basically 4 products in one, because you've got scheduling for virtual primary care, scheduling for virtual urgent care, scheduling for in-clinic primary care and urgent care. And then we have chronic care conditions that those visits are longer. Because we are also full stack, like we support everything in our urgent care clinics. We've got probably thousands of different complaints that we can treat and different conditions. And so, then you've kind of got this weird difference between like urgent care doesn't really matter who you go see. You want to make an appointment and go into the clinic and someone's going to see you. When you go and you want to visit a primary care doctor, you're selecting them and then you want to visit them on their schedule. And then, so we've now we started as urgent care, we now have primary care. Also, I don't recommend building scheduling from scratch if there is something that works for this because of all these weird cases. But like we started as an urgent care scheduling system with fixed appointment slots. So if you ever went and booked an appointment with Carbon, you can literally choose which provider you're going to see and what time they're available. And then we learned like a couple years later that it actually doesn't matter. You should just be able to choose a slot that you want and it assigns you to a provider, and patients don't really care. But again, for primary care, we have to support this whole idea that you're selecting the person that you're going to see. And then there's other weird things like how do you handle walk-in appointments and know how busy a clinic is at any given point in time to support that on both the patient side to say like, I'm here, but then on the provider side or the front desk person to say, let me add you to the walk-in schedule and we can see you in 30 minutes. And the thing that we're now somewhat getting good at is dynamic time slots depending on the reason for the visit. And now that's really hard because you come in for one thing, but then you're telling your provider you've got 10 other conditions when you get there that you haven't told us before when you were triage, and then schedules start to roll over. And then anyway, so it creates a mess. And same thing with primary care. You're typically coming in to establish care first, but then you've got, again, 10 other things that you haven't talked about with a primary care provider in the last, however many number of years. And so we've given, I think we're a little bit unique as well as most of the, I would say like the people on this call are unique in that we're all, quote unquote, like tech companies. And so we want to give scheduling directly to the consumer, but that obviously is a much different paradigm than what people are used to, of calling their primary care doctor and saying, when can you add me to the schedule? And they just write you down in a notepad and then you come in 2 weeks later. So it's hard. I think anyone that undertakes it just needs to really understand like why they're bringing it in-house versus using something out of the box, and like how important it is to get everything right.
Yeah.
Oh, there's one other thing I would like throw out there, just because I'm thinking about like when I built it, it was at Maven Clinic. Now at Allara, we didn't build it. But something to consider is also like the relationship that a provider and the patient have. If it's like a service they're providing quickly, like a quick prescription, or if it's like an ongoing one-on-one relationship. One of the hard things about scheduling, or like, it's not, I know everything's a hard thing, but one of the like gotchas for us was like, oh wait, this is a one-on-one relationship and this person needs to repeat schedule with this provider, which means their availability has to be different, and like the UI will change between their first appointment when they're just like picking versus like now it's specific to one provider. And so that's another one, is like that model and that relationship changing over time or not is like a huge consideration, and stuff like that is really easy to gloss over the first time, and then you're like coming back to it in scheduling 2.0. Like Alex talked about.
Scheduling.
Yeah, scheduling probably deserves its own webinar.
I was just gonna say that. We could do a couple webinars on that. Cool. So some kind of a more open-ended question for as many people to answer, but we'll start with Nimish. Can you think of any pain points for which no good third-party solution exists from what you're seeing? Maybe let's not all like hype our own portfolio company or startups, but like if there's something that you really said like, I have no choice but to build this, what are some capabilities there?
Yeah, I mean, clearly scheduling has come up in the conversation here. Brendan's written an article about it. I mean, there's Acuity, there's a lot of startups going after the scheduling space, but having looked at a lot of EMRs, like it is indeed an unmet need. The second I would say is a good headless EMR that has good specialty feature functionality built out. So, I mean, there's a lot of players in the EMR PCP space, Elation and others, a bevy of them, but like a headless one that actually has functionality built out to the point of Epic would be fantastic. And I think Canvas wants to get in that direction, but it is right now there's such a gap. EMRs are like, you like pick your EMR vendor and then you get your clinical team on the EMR, and then all the pain begins because it is just no one's ever happy with what you found. But those are two I would point out.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying healthy as in headless EMR. We've got the poll a little early, but we can hold off on that, or at least you can start the poll out separately. Brendan, what other kind of capabilities, use cases, features do you think someone needs to build?
I mean, I think there's a whole host of like networks to be built in healthcare that need to exist, right? We have some nascent like data exchange, and e-prescribing obviously is ubiquitous, but referrals, like plug and play labs, like there's just, the solutions out there are slapping, tape, that meme of the guy slapping tape on the water gushing out. It's like that. So I think, when I daydream about like what needs to be built, what should I go build? Like those networks speak to me.
Yeah. And just kind of building on the Mohammed said, network and provider data management would be, I think really interesting, or just provider network management as an API. Kind of like a.
Can I hype some portfolio companies?
Let's get that. Maybe talk about the capabilities that they could do, and maybe we can all go to your website and look at your portfolio.
True. Yeah. But I will say, I'm actively investing out of a small fund that we raised over the last couple of years, and like one of the core areas of focus is digital health and health tech infrastructure, and it's literally now investing in companies that I think need to exist because we built it in-house at Carbon, and it's not fun. And so One of those is doing credentialing and licensing management for payers and providers. They're called Certify OS. We've invested in Butterfly Labs, which was doing white labeled APIs or white labeled home test kits via APIs. We've invested in Imaging Panda, which is trying to fix referrals and sending referrals via APIs and referral management, which is actually that's probably like my number one answer here for things that we still struggle to manage with, and there isn't a tool for it yet, is referral management to all these different specialists with up-to-date practice data and like in a way where we close the loop. So very keen on like solving a lot of these really niche plumbing problems in digital health that I think, we've just had to either use a mix of Google Sheets and Airtable and no code tools, or like I've had to build it in-house because it doesn't exist.
Yeah, those are tricky. You also have to worry about some of those things about like anti-kickback law and Stark law and stuff like that to be careful, but I think can be done and be useful. Molly, anything from you?
I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
Just like general things that would be helpful.
Yeah, so
Don't exist.
yeah. What would be helpful to exist, as your company grows, or if you were to daydream about the next round of funding, and that would unlock a whole Scrum team to, implement something, or
To build.
to not build.
Yeah, I think I know they exist. I haven't seen one that's like amazing yet, but I might not know about them, is like specifically eligibility stuff. Like it seems like most eligibility stuff when it's modern, like for insurance, is more of a wrapper on, but I don't know anyone who's like who's really like trying to like push the envelope technically on that front. But if you know any, please let me know of them. And then the other one is probably like, I love admin tools. Like affordable admin tools are really hard to find, especially for healthcare. Self-hosting them, and like especially if you're seed stage, is really tricky. And so I would love like a more modular admin tool that would let us like visualize our data and manipulate it in a cool way. Those are probably my two that I think a lot about.
Okay, cool. We can do a couple audience questions. We haven't, I don't think we've spoken a lot about like patient clinician asynchronous tools. Do folks have experience with that? If you needed to be able to provide patient to clinician and back and forth async comms, like what are the key product requirements, or what are the features that make a company stand out? Anyone has an answer?
Just having used Crossover Health's platform as a patient, absolutely love the asynchronous care experience that they had. I love this topic. I think what Memora Health offers, if folks have seen it, is really intriguing, sort of like chatbots intelligence linked up with an SMS functionality. So if you can link the patient with a very intelligent engine that can help triage some of that data, that's intriguing.
Okay.
I mean, again, another thing that we've built, we've got asynchronous messaging for patient. I mean, and it's real time if there's a provider inside the message thread. But I will say we've done a lot with chatbots inside the app over the last since the beginning of Carbon. I don't recommend going the chatbot path for triaging and collecting information. Like everyone wants to build a delightful Lemonade-like experience, but we have to collect way more information than Lemonade does. So it's not as fun for patients as it first seems when you're thinking about doing it. But then to second the point on SMS, like if you building as many delightful SMS based experiences, I think is something that I wish we would have done a lot earlier on. Everyone's got a phone. No one wants to download an app. There are a lot of ways that you can get away with sending things that we used to consider PHI that only live inside of an app that we can now do via SMS as long as we get the proper consent. Highly recommend building a really good text experience with even deep linking into like records, for example, behind a couple of different patient identifiable pieces of information. So I would focus a lot on like what's the lowest common denominator that every single person has, and it literally is a phone these days. It's not your app.
Totally.
just to add on to Alex's point, I've been blown away by what people can accomplish with SMS and mobile browsers with no app. Like people are going appless in like a super impressive way these days with just chat you the link, SMS, it goes to your mobile browser and you get an amazing experience without downloading it. So
yeah. And I always love the passwordless as well. That's also just a kind of a nuance there that feels really nice. I know there's an earlier question on like, you know, if you wanted to, you know, kind of buy the whole tech stack for a B2C company, what are some key things? And I think Molly could talk to it more, but I would actually, you know, point folks to Viet's Coda page document that Ray will be sending out after. There's a lot of like really useful stuff in here, like a list of kind of, you know, vendors and companies you can use based on your different use case needs, and that's the point. I don't know, Brendan, for maybe a couple minutes, do you want to riff on, you know, HIPAA compliant tools, HIPAA compliance, BAAs, you know, what considerations need to be in there? And I know I can point people to one of your Substack articles, but maybe the
well, Les, it was actually a Twitter thread where I just went through and ranked whether they're HIPAA compliant or not, and whether they actually mentioned healthcare at all. I think like they're building for a number of industries. They don't know healthcare. Maybe they start to dabble and they see HIPAA and they're like, "Whoa, holy shit, should I do this?" So like step one for all these tools is to like say like, "Don't send us your PHI." And it's like, all right, well, you're useless then. But you still see that like Full Story. I think their solution is mark the elements you don't want to go through our servers, and then like that's their solution. I don't think they signed BAAs, but maybe someone else who's used them more closely. But yeah, and then you have stage two, like, you know, this reluctant relief where they realize they really want to sell into healthcare, they need to add those features and spend some calories. And like Twilio, I think, was doing this a year ago, or maybe they're still doing it and spending like $40 million to go fully HIPAA, you know, compliant or high trust compliant. So it's a big effort, but like the more mature generalized tooling is working their way over there and signing BAAs or building in the features. And you can look at, you know, FreshPaint is a great example of a company that's like, oh, we have this cool little toggle to turn off sending HIPAA data for if some of your downstream sources don't support BAAs yet, don't support HIPAA, so they can help you overcome some of the limitations of more generic tooling. But it's still battle. Like people just like, I'll just go sell to like, you know, e-commerce. It's easier.
Yeah, I mean, we do sign a BAA with everyone, although we decide what data we want to share, like very explicitly define what data. Like, for example, I don't think anyone really needs to have individual session data for what an individual patient is doing inside of an app. Like, I'm not really sure how that helps you. Like an aggregate view is definitely interesting to see where people are dropping off, but it's not, I don't really care that one person clicked into the labs page and then tapped on a lab, and you know, and if it crashes, we have Bugsnag for that. Like we'll determine when the app crashes in different places that way. But and then on the aggregate level, like you really don't need that much PHI or any PHI, and that's what we realized when we were doing instrumentation and analytics. At least was, in theory, we really didn't need a BAA. We weren't sending anything to them that if anyone, like worst case scenario, someone hacked into Amplitude and got access to you know, to all the stuff that we're sending, like there's nothing identifiable in there. Everything's anonymized. And so I think being really mindful of that. And at the end of the day, the BAA is just to protect, I think, your company in the event of litigation and, you know, if something gets breached or whatever. But if you're following best practices, I almost find that you don't need to share PHI outside of your own systems for the majority of things that you're doing.
I just want enterprise tech tools to love healthcare as much as I do, Alex. Can I have that?
Yeah, because it is where, I mean, I'm dealing with that now. It's like, it is though extra work to, you know, find, you know, create policy, you know, build the tech, build the policy, decide what you're going to send over. And if you're not going to send it over, how do you help people internally match that back to relevant information? So it, you know, I'm living through now. It is a pain. Kind of we're wrapping up. Let's say we're wrapped up on time. Yeah, well, I guess we'll kind of close it out now. Alex, Brendan, Molly, Nimish, thanks all for coming, for your stories. and input. And in closing, I'd like to thank again Ray Mina from Fresh Paint for organizing this. And as a reminder, he'll be sending out a follow-up email to everyone who I assume signed up with a link to the recording and more resources that were mentioned today. So you can build your digital health tech stack. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you in the various Slack channels that we're all in. Have a good Wednesday.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.